Welcome to the review of the World Chess Championship between Magnus Carlsen and Ian Nepo. This is game 5. You may be wondering why on the channel game 1 to 4 isn't there. Well, the reason is because most often after the games I stream on my channel twitch.tv/pen_medicine. So if you want to catch the other recaps, which I don't post here, you might be interested in checking out the Twitch channel. But anyway, let's get straight into the game. We've had 4 consecutive draws, hoping for a bigger or a different result. So we have e4 by Nepo, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6. We have the same relopers that has been played in game 1 and in game 3. Bishop to a4, knight f6. I'm just skipping through the details here since there's not really much to talk about. Many channels have overanalyzed this. I'll just talk about the main important things here. Castles kingside, bishop to e7, rook to e1, b5, bishop to b3, and castles kingside, and then a4. In game 3 we had Magnus play bishop to b4, and in game 1 I think before he castled he played knight to a5. So this time we have a different line. So you can see Magnus is trying to experiment, or maybe his team of seconds have been helping him, trying to figure out ways of combating everything that Nepo is bringing, and that's what you would expect. The reasons why sometimes the same opening occurs in these World Championship matches is that each one is trying to up the other. So you would notice the difference in the styles of each game, though the opening choice might be similar. So this time we have after a4, rook to b8, and actually this choice is not so popular. Actually, it's has more of a strong win record for white. So Magnus going for this is actually a very bit questionable. But the idea here is simple. If ever the trade occurs, you avoid any trades on this side of the board, and if possible you plan some b3 push, since mostly in these type of reloped positions you are preparing c3 in case of knight to a4, so that you can slot your bishop down to c2. It's a common idea that we have in the relopers. But that remains to be seen. A takes b4, a takes b4, then h3 by Nepo. Nepo played very quickly. I think Magnus was more down on the clock as compared to Nepo. And then we have d6, c3. As we are talking about, it's a very normal idea in the relopers. This square serves as a retreating square for your bishop, and also can be very offensive because you realize that if this pawn were to move to either d3 or d4, the bishop is having a very nice, the two bishops are having a very good nice target on black's king position. So after c3, Magnus plays b4, which is the true idea behind his whole plan there. And now what this does is it stops you from playing d4, which would have been Nepo's idea should Magnus have not played d4. And basically, why is this? So after d4, you don't take here immediately. You simply play b takes c3, b takes c3, e takes d4, c takes d4, and then d5. And after your opponent plays e5, you simply have knight to e4, and this is sort of like an octopus knight. It's very powerful, and black has equalized and is actually even gaining some sort of advantage against white. So playing d4 would have been questionable by Nepo, but he decided to play d3. Another way of going through it. And usually after you play the move d3, one of the things you look out for is the transferring of the knight over to the g3 square, mostly in some positions to get your knight to f5, which is a very good square for the knight. And so far it looks very dominant for Nepo. There's not really much in terms of moves that black has. Black doesn't really have much in the terms of moves. His pieces are so restricted. This bishop is very bad. This bishop doesn't really have many good squares. The square he would really want to get his bishop to is e6, trying to trade off these bishops, but as at now it's not really that good of an idea. So now we have bishop to c3. Let's say bishop to c3, b takes c3, b takes c3, and then d5. Now again, you do not want to take on this square. That's the funny thing about some of these positions. You would think that, oh, I could just take and then my position is sort of fixed. But then the problem is that after knight takes d5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, rook takes e5, bishop to e6. Now black has this very strong knight on d5, and if you don't do anything about it, it could become a very big problem. I think I watched one of the recaps, and one of the lines discussed here was, I think bishop takes, and then bishop to, is it bishop to a6? There was a very interesting line that was analyzed there, but mostly black is for choice. Mostly black is for choice in these lines, and Nepo saw that very well, so he did not in fact play the captures move here. Instead, we have knight b to d2. He's beginning the transfer of his knight over to this square. D takes e5, d takes e5, bishop to d6, strengthening the squares here. He's holding on these 2 pawns, and that's very sad to see, because this bishop should be a free roaming piece, but right now it has been reduced to sort of a pawn. Another thing about this move is that you are creating a square for this knight to transfer onto the f4 square, which is also a good square for black. Black would also want to get his knight to that square. So Magnus is actually trying to find a way to activate his pieces, because he's very cramped as it stands now. We have queen to c2, just developing a piece. Not really much you can talk about concerning this move. h6, preventing any piece from getting to g5. If white would make moves such as these, he would encroach more on black's position, so he decides to stop it. We have knight to f1, continuing the ideas. Knight to e7, like we said, and then knight to g3. Knight to g3 could basically be that he's planning to move this here. We have knight to g6, and during the coverage, I think the chess.com coverage, most people were considering that Nepo should just go straight for knight to f5. And I mean, the problem with this move is, in this variation that was discussed, so knight takes e4. Now you don't take with the queen. If you take with the queen, you run into rook takes. And sorry, if you play, for example, after knight takes, you play rook takes, then you simply run into this pin. So you have to be very careful exactly how you play this, because it's not as white, black and blue as you might say. So after knight takes, you first have to play knight takes. Then after pawn takes, you still can't take this knight. You have to go, I think, bishop to d5. And there's a very crazy position. So most people were hoping that something like this would happen, where the game looks so unbalanced and dynamic and so on and so forth. But they decided to play solidly with Nepo decided to play solidly with bishop to e3. It's the most solid option you can go for, and you can't fault him for doing this. To continue, we have queen to e8, and what this does is activates the queen somewhat. The queen was somewhat cramped on this square, so bringing the queen here allows the queen to maneuver quite a bit, and also allows the fact that if bishop comes into e6 and there is a trade, the queen will be able to catch her back and not the pawn, because that would be more weakening for Magnus. And in this position, most people were considering the fact that c4 would make a lot of sense for white, and the reason being c5. So the discussion is around, does this position help Nepo? And some of the major concerns is the fact that because of the position that results from this, for example, if you play bishop here, rook to e8, rook to d1, sorry, and then c5, this sort of position, you've locked out your bishop from the game, and mostly your opponent can try to use these squares to his advantage. I think there was something like this. I can't remember the lines that were really discussed. I'm just making some random moves, so forgive me. And the point is, you could argue that you could actually get your bishop to this square, and it's very good for white. And with Magnus's low time, he spent a lot of time thinking in this game. And with Magnus running low on time, he won't be able to figure out the nuances in the position. So that was one of the major concerns. But c4 could be stopped. There were two major moves. One of them is bishop to b4, and the other idea is c5. But c5 seems to be the worst of the two options. Sorry, let me get back to that position. So if c5 just seems to lock out the bishop. The bishop now becomes a base pawn, which is not where you actually want your bishop to be. So what we actually had in the game was rook e to d1, and bishop, and finally Magnus gets to play this move, bishop to e6. He decides to play here bishop to a4, and many people were hoping that Magnus would play this funny move here, queen to c8. And why is this move important? Of course, you are going to try to trap the rook, for example, like this, but that's not what we are talking about here. You give away the rook and simply go bishop takes, and if takes, the king should not take because you invite knight takes knight takes f4 with check. Should the king run away, you bring in your queen and you are threatening many scary things on white's position. So many people were hoping that variation would happen, but of course Nepo is not like some of us who would miss some of these tactics. Of course, most people are looking for more entertaining lines that are so crazy that it's likely someone will make a mistake and then we get a definitive result, but that's not actually what happened. So bishop to d7, we get the trade. No, knight moves first and then we get the trade. And at this point, it's more or less a draw, though there was a fight that occurred afterwards. Let's just skip to the most important part I have about this, is how Magnus defends this position. He basically, as Gotham Chess would say, he cocoons. He brings back both of his knights to simply take hold of every single part of the position, light squares and dark squares alike. He defends them adequately and then does a re-maneuvering of his pieces. And the one I really enjoyed here was the bishop coming back and replacing it with the knight here. Now this knight was very inactive, wasn't doing much, so now he forces a trade of an active knight for a passive knight for a much more easy position to defend. And he finally gets this position where it's not so easy to penetrate his defense. For someone who doesn't believe in fortresses, he created a very strong one. And at this point, they just had a threefold repetition, and that's how the game ended. Now, you notice that during my analysis, I kept on saying most people were hoping. Now, it's very sad to see draws, but the truth of the matter is, when you look at some of these games, it's not just a draw. The thought processes that the two players go through shows that they are indeed trying to gain a result. But when you're equally matched, it's very difficult to get a decisive result. I am not that strong of a chess player, but as my skill increases, most of my games begin to end in draws because it becomes very clear the lines you are going through. I'm not saying I'm their level, but at their level, that's the case. What is the future of chess? We don't know, but of course, one thing I said on stream was that if two players are equally skilled, the determinant factor is stamina. So maybe if there weren't any rest days and they were just playing consistently, we would get some slip-ups definitely, or you just reduce the time control. But anyway, that has been it from me. Tomorrow is the rest day. I will be posting both this video and the third hour of the Brilliancy Chess Academy Blitz Marathon. I should have posted that a long time ago. I know, I'm sorry, but maybe this will just help pass the time and help you guys enjoy some fun chess. Thank you guys so much for watching. Links to our socials and all our other channels in the description. Peace.